Gabi and I have had many conversations about hyphens. Part of that hyphen, for both Gabi and me, is that of indigenous Americans. Holidays such as Columbus Day and Thanksgiving are interpreted by many Native Americans as celebrations of the massacre and subjugation of indigenous peoples by European colonizers. So it surprised me when Gabi expressed her desire for Ola to observe Thanksgiving before we left for holiday break. She mentioned her idea to me in mid-October, to which I replied with some choice expletives. She tried to let me know that she understood my objections, but still loved the holiday. I thought the conversation was dead until a few weeks later when it came up again in an Ola officers meeting. The topic for the meeting was how to get new ideas for events in Ola. I let everyone know that I wouldn't turn ideas down. Gabi pounced at the opportunity. She said, Ola Thanksgiving. And before I could say no, Safi shot a look at me as if to say, you better keep your mouth shut. Gabi won. We decided to have Ola Thanksgiving the Sunday before break. The Friday and Saturday before fall break was a conference at UNC Asheville entitled Living In, Living With Diversity. On Saturday morning, I participated in an immigration realities workshop. The turnout for the workshop was very low, and since everyone in the workshop was either an organizer or an Ola member, we decided to make the workshop more personal. The seven of us, including Gabi, sat in a closed circle. We started telling our personal stories of migration stories. When it was time for Gabi to tell her story, she told us that when her parents decided to move to the US, they could only get visas for themselves and two of her siblings. This meant that most of her family would move to the US without her and her sisters, Veronica and Adriana. At 9 years old, Gabi had to live apart from her family for 9 months. Gabi described how difficult it was for her without her parents. Finally, the three sisters were able to receive visas and move to the US. The day they met their parents in Texas was the day before Thanksgiving. When Gabi said that, she turned to me, and with an understanding and soft gaze that only Gabi can give, she told me that what she had been trying to communicate for nearly a month, that we all have our own stories and our own associations with events. For Gabi, Thanksgiving did not conjure images of indigenous people being massacred. Rather, Thanksgiving meant reunification with family. The next day, Ola had our Thanksgiving meal at Safi's house. We all shared her tiny kitchen. We ate baked chicken, maduros, mac and cheese, ensalada de mango, French bread, pies, pan dulce, deviled eggs, and more. As we filled our bellies, we sat around Safi's living room and talked about the diversity conference. After about 20 minutes, I asked Gabi to share her story. When she was done telling the tale, everyone was quiet, and I broke the silence by saying, and then I felt like an asshole. Everyone laughed in agreement that indeed I had been an asshole. Okay. So race is fluid, right? Ideally, the race and ethnicity, all kinds of identity is a fluid thing. But the reason it's been seen as such a rigid construct in the United States is because of history. The history of race and ethnicity in the United States. Part of that legacy is Jim Crow laws and the one-drop rule. Jim Crow laws, the one-drop rule essentially said that if you had any African-American descent, that meant you're black. For Native Americans, blood quantum laws calculated ethnicity by sheer percentages, and ethnicity is more about experience rather than percentage. You have two people who get together, their kid isn't 50% anything, it's about experience again. So this leaves little room, this legacy leaves little room for ethnic and racial fluidity in the United States. So how do we resist these rigid constructs? And with that, I'd like to introduce my third participant, Asha. She's a 20-year-old international studies major at UNCA. I met Asha in spring of 2008 through Ola. Asha's father is from India, and her mother is Irish-American. Asha was born and raised in Charleston, South Carolina. She was born with a cleft lip and palate, which she talks about as having playing a central role in her hyphen. We talk about this hyphen as a thing now with our friends, like, how's your hyphen? This kind of. So it's like it's a part of the balancing act in her construction of her own identity. So with that, I'm going to think about this in terms of resistance to these rigid forms. This is a poem she wrote for her a class that she was taking at the time.
First, let's get one thing straight. Red dot, not red feather. That's right, you heard it. If I were Native American, I'd tell you. I'd say half Cherokee, half Irish, or maybe even half Lumbee, half Irish, but not half Indian, half Irish. That means Indian, like the country, like the short brown people, the ones who own gas stations, subways, and motels, like the ones who help you with your Dell at 2 a.m. with fake American names like Amy or Sam, like the country where the Kama Sutra came from, like the place that birthed yoga pre-Western world corruption. Then there's the other half, the other whole. Educate me, why am I pushed to call it half? Why can't I be equally and wholly two things? I am equally, fully, completely, entirely, and wholly a myriad of factors creating the person sitting in front of you. My childhood was filled with Catholic masses, Irish lullabies, and Christmases in Boston, with bedtime stories taken from the Ramayana, Hindu lullabies sung by a rather toneless father in trips to India, with surgeries and scars, dog bites and fears, and explaining what exactly a congenital defect is. Girls just like myself, 3 others came before me, then 8 years of silence. I came roaring. Unexpected, unprecedented, while still floating in that warm space that Sylvia Plath can describe so fluidly, they tested me, but for all the wrong things. The irony is overwhelming, at times overpowering, so I'm not sure if when I came, I really roared, or if my first cry was more of a gurgle swallowed by the breaks in my lip, my palate. Here comes the irony. It hits me like a train. They tested me for Down syndrome, trisomy 21. I can tell you this, that's an error on the 21st chromosome with one too many chromatids. But, oh, what caused my defect? That I cannot tell you. And I'm sure you've heard this, but I grew up with various colors, all meaning very little to me. People surrounding me simply varied. My father, an immigrant from India who simply speaks how he does, told me, "Ashu beti, please come pay respects before the SATs," who taught me the true respect encompassed in the greeting namaskar. My mother, a tough Irish Catholic from Boston who grew up in Roslindale, met an immigrant and, by happenstance, fell in love. Together breaking norms, they built a home in the South. My high school classmates, mostly privileged, money of little Charleston, breeding questions inside myself. Blonde, fair, and tall, quite unlike myself. My sisters, the source of my strength apart from my mother, conflicted like me, torn between first generation and assimilation. My extended family, in colors varying, fair hair to dark skin. My cousin, who when we were little told me, "Let's watch BET. Oh wait, you can't. You're not black." So maybe, possibly, it was then that I became less colorblind. I've been called everything from Mexican to Eskimo, Indian to Native American, Spanish to Italian, even Egyptian, and surely more I'm simply forgetting. It creates a perspective, a lens through which I view my identity, my personal, my religious, my political identity with a capital I. What is race but a name we define by color? Political systems create invisible lines separating, subjugating, always creating an other, a group to be delineated, differentiated.
So with that, I'd like to leave you with a screen that you can think about. This is UNC Asheville's application for enrollment. And just to clarify, you can click as many boxes as you want, but it still doesn't, to me anyway, seem adequate to kind of describe experience of race and ethnicity. So I'd like to kind of, for you to think about how could this be different, or what would be better, or if there isn't anything better. So with that, thank you.